the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. A new hero will emerge. One who is ready. One who makes sure their friends and family are set. And has the power to go at a moment's notice. This fire season, you're the hero. We are Ready Nevada County.
Nevada County has a new tool to make evacuations safer and more efficient in the event of an emergency. This new tool is called Zone Haven, and we need you to know your zone.
In order to know your zone, you need to go to community.zonehaven.com, type in your address. Once your address populates in the pop-up window, take that information and write down the zone that is given to you where you know you'll find it in case of emergency.
Zone Haven and knowing your zone does not replace Nixle and/or Code Red. It actually supplements them, and it makes those tools more powerful because you'll know what zones are being evacuated or which ones are being placed on advisory. And as a result, you won't have to do anything else other than listen to those messages and know if it's time to go.
Even if you don't have internet, this could be done by word of mouth, it can be done by radio, or it could be us driving down the street, so please know your zone.
From Truckee to Lake of the Pines, from Chicago Park to Spenceville, every single square mile of Nevada County has a zone. And having a zone that you know for your neighborhood is going to help you save time to be able to evacuate and keep you and your family safe.
Ready Nevada County is an education campaign designed to help the public have successful outcomes during emergency events. We really focus on a whole host of disasters or emergency events. We want to have a broad spectrum. We want to be prepared for anything, but really we focus a lot on wildfire because we know that's one of the most likely events to happen in Nevada County.
Ready, Set, Go is really built around the wildfire premise to prepare residents to be ready before an event, to move into the set posture when there's a red flag or a fire is near you, and then to go when it's time to go.
Essentially, in its simplest form, it's a 3-tiered community emergency preparedness plan.
I have lived in this house, which we built, my husband and I, 26 years ago now, actually. We selected the hardy plank, the concrete siding, and also the metal roof. Then when we moved up here and heard about the 49er fire, that's when we started to say, wow, this really is even more important than we first realized.
So the 49er fire is one of the most historic fires in Nevada County's history. They figured it changed the laws of the state of California that said this is how you have to protect your home. That came out of Nevada County.
Steve Eubanks came from the Fire Safe Council, and the main thing we needed to pay attention to was the ladder fuels. Planting has been removed from the edges of the house so that it does not touch the house. It was an incredible service from the Fire Safe Council to come out and spend a couple of hours going through this property
So the ready phase is when there's no immediate threat to you and your family. This is the time when you should be doing education and planning, whether that be training, educating yourself, or accumulating equipment, hardening your home, creating defensible space.
Defensible space is really all about creating a buffer zone between your house and flammable vegetation. We really focus on defensible space around the home, that first 100 feet, but also around the roadway too. Another aspect of the ready phase is hardening the home, and really what that means is making your home more resilient to wildfire.
That's going to be putting the fine-grained mesh around the vents of your home so that embers won't get under your house or into the eaves of your house. That's going to be using non-combustible materials on your deck and around your home. So when an ember storm comes through, it's not going to ignite your home itself.
I currently live here in Grass Valley with my parents. All of us have sleep apnea, so we all have CPAP machines that require power.
We're calling to order today's Planning Commission and public hearing. So, Laura, would you lead us in the pledge to the flag?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. Now is the time for public comment on anything that is not on today's agenda. So if anybody has anything that's not on today's agenda, then you get 3 minutes. Please state your name and where you live.
Roll call, Dan.
Oh, roll call first. Hang tight.
Thank you. Please answer if you are here. Commissioner Duncan?
Here.
Commissioner McAteer?
Here.
Commissioner Garst?
Here.
Chair Millman?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, restarting public comment on items that are not on today's agenda.
Hello, my name is Michael Taylor. I live in District 1, and I want to bring attention to what I call the Planning Commission dysfunction. And I would like to share some of my past experiences as a contractor and developer and in the past years. And I'd like to say that I think there is a digression in the compliance of the Planning Commission. I know there's a lot of changes happening. There's changes happening, and I encourage the new Planning Commission and the commissioners coming in that they hear this. I got back involved with the Ranch House project and coming to the Planning Commission meetings. The first one, 2 commissioners showed up. The second one, 3 showed up. With Laura being took the position of being the chair for that meeting. I want to point out that in that Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commissioners met behind closed doors with the applicants, the county, for 20 minutes. Then started the meeting 10 minutes late. I came to that meeting with the intention of asking for a continuance because I did not get my PRA requests fulfilled. I brought that to Laura's attention. She said, this is public comment, this is not the time to talk about that. I sat down, then they just started the meeting, clearly knowing I was going to ask for a continuance because 1, there's 3 of you, 2, that I didn't get my PRA request fulfilled. Some of the other problems that I see with the Planning Commission is you guys come in already predetermined what your decision is. You already have written notes as to what you're going to say at the end of the meeting, not even taking the time to hear what everybody has to say. So you read your notes, I am not going to support this for this reason and this reason, and a couple of you are guilty for this. That's not how this meeting is supposed to work. This meeting is supposed to be open, hearing staff, hearing the public, not making a decision before you get here, and then making a decision based on what you're hearing in that meeting at that time. My perspective of your responsibility is making a decision based on the general plan, based on CEQA, EIR use, land laws, and staff reports. Not how much money someone's going to make from the project, not if it's popular with the neighbors, not if it's politically wrong or correct. It's a decision based on facts. Facts for approving a project or not approving a project. My encouragement is to understand the importance of the firewall that you guys are, the responsibility of this firewall for the county in bringing projects forward. People are not bringing projects forward because they don't, I don't want to say it's a joke. It's a crapshoot to come here with a project after spending $50,000, $200,000 to somehow get your guys' support or not based on facts. So I encourage you guys moving forward to understand the responsibility of your position in this county and your appointed position by your supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else have a public comment on an issue that is not on today's agenda?
Yes, my name is Al Bolf. I live at 11482 Ridge Road, up from the high school. I'm working on a project, I'm pushing a project with the supervisors to electrify the 80 rail corridor. And above the electrification, I worked for SMUD for 39 years. We'll bring SMUD power up here and being more competitive with PG&E. And now PG&E is asking for another rate increase, so I think everybody should listen up. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others who would like to comment on items not on today's agenda? Okay. Hearing none, seeing none, we will close this part of the meeting.
You're doing the consent item.
Are there any corrections to today's agenda at all?
No corrections, Madam Chair.
All right, so now we have on the consent items, the annual review of the development agreement for the Tykert-Bokert Quarry use permit.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Can you call roll on that, please?
Yes, thank you. How do you vote, Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAteer?
Yes.
Commissioner Garst?
Yes.
And Chair Millman?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. We are at the exciting part. Or not. One moment.
Not quite. I'm not sure if you got the amended agenda, but there's some commission business before the consent item.
I don't think I have that.
I don't think we have one up here.
Okay. All right, we do have some commission business today. We are looking at adopting a resolution of recognition for our esteemed colleague, Commissioner Laura Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to start out. Excuse me. I've been a planner with Nevada County since 2005. And during that time, Laura has been a consummate professional on the board. And so I have for her a Community Development Agency challenge coin for service. So I want to give that to her. And then following that, Brian has some words to say as well.
Thank you, Tyler. Commissioners, I know we have an important item on our agenda today, but wanted to take some time to recognize Commissioner Laura Duncan, who's been on the commission for 25 years. We have a resolution that you've all signed that we'd like to present Laura with, and I'd like to read some of the accomplishments of Laura over the last 25 years. And the resolution reads in part, whereas on May 2nd, 2000, Laura Duncan was appointed by the Honorable Karen Knack, District 2, Nevada County Supervisor, to serve as a member of the Nevada County Planning Commission. And whereas Commissioner Duncan was retained as the District 2 Planning Commissioner for Supervisor Sue Horn and Ed Schofield. During her nearly 25 years of service on the Planning Commission, Commissioner Duncan has participated in countless controversial and complex public hearings, including those associated with mining projects, commercial developments, large residential subdivisions, general plan amendments, zoning ordinances, and every other type of land use project possible. Whereas Commissioner Duncan has helped shape and grow Nevada County as a quality place to live, work, and recreate by ensuring smart growth, quality design, and ample recreational amenities for people and equestrians alike. Whereas during her years on the Planning Commission, Commissioner Duncan has served as both commission chairperson and vice chairperson, and she has also contributed countless hours to field review of projects, planning-related issues, and other matters affecting Nevada County. Whereas because of her many previous years of work as a professional planner, Commissioner Duncan has brought an invaluable perspective and understanding to the Planning Commission, and that experience has greatly contributed to prudent decision-making aimed at environmental, social, and economic stability of Nevada County. Now therefore be it hereby resolved by the Planning Department and the Planning Commission of the County of Nevada that profound appreciation is extended to District 2 Planning Commissioner Laura Duncan for exemplary service as well as unfailing commitment to attend commission meetings. Your dedication to Nevada County and leadership you have provided to so many commissioners will be greatly missed. The Planning Department and your fellow commissioners wish you well in your continuing contributions to the well-being of Nevada County, its residents, property owners, and its environment. Thank you, Commissioner Duncan.
Thank you. I appreciate the resolution. A few brief words. I know we have an important public hearing to get to, but I would like to say it's been a unique honor and a privilege to have worked with the incredible planning commissioners that I've interacted with and mutually sat here and made decisions, but also the staff. I mean, I've seen quite a number of staff turnover through the years, and I think every one of them had the best interest of Nevada County at heart when they came forward, and they also applied their professional skills. But really importantly, I think I've been lucky to have interacted with the county. Nevada County is really rich with characters, personalities, unique people that care deeply about Nevada County and the future. Sometimes people didn't always agree, but I think we were always united with we wanted what was best for our community, and we strive to get there. And I think it's an ongoing effort to make sure that we do. So I thank everyone, especially during the last few years. It was quite hectic, and Shelley Romreel's in the back there. She was an amazing support to the Planning Commission because it really does take everyone to be successful up here. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Commissioners, we just have one more commemorative plaque to give Commissioner Duncan as another token of our appreciation. If you want to give it to her, that's fine.
Wow, I'm going to have to find wall space. This one's desktop. Oh, why, thank you.
So Laura, I just want to tell you, I've known you a long, long time, and it's been a delight the last couple of years serving up here with you, and I thank you ever so much. I mean, to be a person who volunteers on the Planning Commission is not an easy job, and moreover, to someone who we all three look up to with your wise assistance and leadership. And so we are losing a huge void in our commission.
Thank you, Terry. I know we have somewhere to go, so I'm all for it.
All right. let's move to the public hearing on the, and let's have Tyler take this one.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Tyler Barrington, Principal Planner for the record. The item for your consideration today is Ordinance 24-2, and it's a proposed addition to the county's zoning ordinance to allow for tiny homes on wheels in Nevada County.
Real quick, we don't have the slides on our screens.
Okay. Yeah, I could just continue on. I'll go through them, and then if you have questions, you can ask at the end. I apologize for that. They are on the TV in the back, but it's a long ways away. So a little bit of information on the background and the need. Currently, they went off on the dais too, so we'll take a brief minute here. How about now? I'm happy to continue on, or if the commission wants to.
Go ahead and continue, Tyler. We'll look up top here.
All right. So currently, the state of California, as well as Nevada County, is in a housing crisis. And so the Board of Supervisors, as part of the 2024 board workshop and part of their housing objective, directed staff to look at allowing for alternative housing types in Nevada County. The planning department was directed to look at allowing for tiny homes on wheels, to allow for reduced development costs, to increase the county's housing supply, and to provide for regulatory flexibility. In addition to this initiative, the county building department was directed to look at reintroducing Title 25, which is also known as limited density owner-built rural dwellings, which further relaxes standards for building. That ordinance is being initiated and drafted by the building department and is currently going through the public outreach process. So that's a second step to this ordinance, but a little bit unrelated. The planning department was directed and utilized existing models of other jurisdictions which have passed similar ordinances, including Placer County, Mendocino County, Humboldt County, the city of Lake Tahoe, and many others. In California, tiny homes are generally required to comply with standards of and be approved by one of the following types of occupancy. A building or a home has to be reviewed and be consistent with the California Residential Code or the Building Code. A manufactured home has to meet standards from the State Department of Housing and Community Development or the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. HCD has what's called factory-built housing, and what's before you today essentially is considered either a recreational vehicle or park trailer, which, as defined by the State Department of Housing and Community Development. In 2016, they issued a white paper, which is attached to your staff report, to help define these standards. Typically, RVs and other park model trailers are required to be occupied in mobile home parks and are subject to the Mobile Home Parks Act and or the Special Occupancy Parks Act. This white paper by HCD allowed for local jurisdictions to look at allowing these units outside of those types of parks. So there's three pictures up before you today, and generally a definition of a recreational vehicle, and it's either considered a mobile home, travel trailer, truck camper, or camping trailer with or without motive power designed for human habitation for recreational, emergency, or other occupancy. Those are generally the two pictures to the left. And then a park model trailer, which is a picture of the red building in the right and what's being considered today. RVs, recreational vehicles, are typically registered and sold in California, are required to carry a permanent fixated insignia from the manufacturer, a third-party inspector, meeting the National Safety, or the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, or the National Fire Protection Agency, or NFPA. This definition is taken directly from Health and Safety Code of what a tiny homes on wheel or a park model RV is. And I'm going to read it into the record just so that the commission and the public understands what's being proposed. A park model RV is a separate independent dwelling unit for one or more persons that is no larger than 400 square feet, excluding loft space as defined by California Health and Safety Code section 18033. It includes basic functional areas that support daily routines, including a bathroom, a kitchen, and a sleeping area. It is built on a single chassis and mounted on wheels and cannot be moved under its own power, and is titled and registered with the California Department of Motor Vehicles. This is the definition that is being proposed as a part of this ordinance. Staff is proposing to allow tiny homes on wheels similar to other jurisdictions, consistent with underlying density. We're proposing to allow them as either a primary unit, a second unit consistent with density, an accessory dwelling unit, or both, and then as a dwelling group consistent with allowed density. There are several zoning districts in Nevada County where you can get approved for a traditional built dwelling group through a use permit. In addition to a proposed tiny homes on wheels ordinance, we're also requesting that we allow for dwelling groups consistent with allowed density in the R2 zoning district to provide for more flexibility and the additional potential housing units that would come with this ordinance. Tiny homes on wheels are being looked at very similar to just your traditional built single-family dwelling or accessory dwelling unit. They have to be consistent with site development standards, including meeting setbacks and impervious surface coverages. They have to be consistent with the county's resource protection standards, so essentially they need to be placed, outside of setbacks or sensitive resources. There are some proposed health and safety standards, which I'll get into in the next few slides. And then also they have to be consistent with the tiny homes on wheels design standards. So some of the proposed health and safety standards for this ordinance include requiring these units to maintain their ANSI and NFPA certification and include an insignia at all times, as well as DMV registration. And the intent behind that is because of the definition of a park model trailer, it has to be able to be pulled down the road. That's also why it's restricted to 400 square feet. Anything larger may not be able to be pulled by your average vehicle. Much like any other house in Nevada County, a tiny homes on wheel would have to provide a fire-safe driveway. It would have to meet those standards. It'd have to be designed to meet the wind and snow loads applicable to the area where it will be located. So if proposed, say on Donner Summit, there are significantly higher snow loads than it would be if in Penn Valley. The ordinance does allow for you to build an engineered ramada. If your tiny homes on wheel couldn't meet the snow loads, that would be engineered to meet those snow loads to accommodate for that. This is under both health and safety standards, but also under the design standards. A tiny homes on wheels is proposed to be insulated with R13 insulation in the walls and R19 on the ceilings and floors to ensure that these units can be safely habitated for the long-term period. Regarding utility connections and inspections, this is where the building department would get involved. The building department would not be approving the construction of the unit. That would be done through the certification process at an off-site builder. It'd be very similar to a manufactured home, but the building department would get involved with the electrical connections to ensure that they are safe. The foundation would be required to be anchored down. The wheels would have to remain and the anchored and tie downs would have to meet manufacturer specifications. A water supply and sewage disposal would be similar to any other single-family dwelling or accessory dwelling unit and have to meet the standards as required by the Environmental Health Department. When directed to prepare this ordinance, the board also directed staff to look at the applicability of allowing for all homes on wheels. And so the standards were set up in a way, and as outlined in your staff report, where there are certain standards from the design standpoint that, if removed, would open it up to allow for all homes on wheels, essentially those units that you see on your screen now. So some of these standards include that the tiny homes on wheel cannot move under its own power, that the materials for the exterior wall include materials traditionally utilized of a residential development, so things like hardy board siding, other things that meet the wildland-urban interface requirements. Originally, the ordinance proposed to restrict that for roof and pop-outs, slide-outs, and other extensions, but based on direction received from the president of the Tiny Homes Industry Association, that wasn't necessary with the added requirement for insulation. The windows are required to be at least double paned and include trim and other design features that mimic a building. The undercarriage shall be concealed from view with screening that is affixed and permanent. And I underlined this one because this was a recommendation from the Tiny Homes on Wheels Association, as well as similar to other ordinances that have been recently adopted, including Mendocino County, that the tiny homes on wheels should be constructed of 2x4 framing on 16 or 24-inch centers, and that the walls, as I previously mentioned, are insulated to R13, and the floors and ceilings are insulated to R19. When drafting this ordinance, staff also carried forward some of the other requirements of other units within the county, and primarily accessory dwelling units. But one of those requirements, because the purpose of this is to provide for permanent long-term housing, is there is a restriction that is required, a deed restriction, that prohibits the use of a tiny home on wheel for less than 30 days. And so therefore short-term rentals will be prohibited. It does allow for accessory structures such as decks, porches, sheds, and that ramada that I mentioned, as long as it's detached from the tiny home on wheels. And then all tiny homes on wheels, similar to an accessory dwelling unit that's either located beyond the dead-end road limit or within a high or very high fire zone, is required to prepare a fire protection plan with either the county fire marshal or the applicable fire district. And those, we do have standard templates for those. They're typically, they identify the nearest fire facility, where there might be water storage, how far, what their evacuation plan is. Regarding public outreach, so on the onset of this application, the staff planner who originally worked on this did meet with several industry professionals. They met with the Nevada County Contractors Association, as well as the Truckee Contractors Association. They met with Building and Environmental Health and Public Works, and that helped shape the ordinance. In July of 2024, the Planning Department released the ordinance for public review, and that was originally set to close on September 5th, 2024. As a result of significant comments received, staff did extend that public comment period from August 30th till today, and also up until the board takes action on this item. On October 16th, staff did present to the South County Municipal Advisory Council and did the same on October 17th. Within attachment 3 of your staff report, a significant number of comments were received for this project and are entered into the public record. A majority of those comments are in support of the ordinance, many requesting that the county look further and provide for all homes on wheels. Your commission also received a staff memo with a few other additional comments that were received after completion of the staff report, and it also includes both of the MAC's recommendations. The South County MAC recommended on a 3-1 vote that the commission recommend to the board to adopt the ordinance as it's written, and then the Penn Valley Municipal Advisory Council unanimously recommended that the county, the Planning Commission, and the board adopt the ordinance. They also stated that we should continue to look at potential opportunities for other alternative housing. And finally, on your desk, received last night about around 4:30 or so, is a petition for all homes on wheels. From staff's perspective, and based on the direction of the Board of Supervisors, we look at this as just one tool towards addressing our housing crisis, and it won't solve the problem completely. This is a first phase, and so if the Board of Supervisors directs staff to look at allowing for all homes on wheels, that additional public outreach and stakeholder engagement, additional research, both legally and physically, be done prior to taking such action. Your staff report does outline that functionally, and as I previously mentioned, it is possible to remove some of those design regulations that would open it up and allow for other alternative housing. But at this time, that type of use hasn't been vetted with our public. So with that, staff would recommend that the Planning Commission recommend to the Board of Supervisors to find the ordinance categorically exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15305, which is a minor change in land use limitations. That's because we're looking at allowing these similar to any other single-family home or accessory dwelling unit. And then second, we would recommend that the Board of Supervisors, or recommend that the Commission recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt the attached tiny homes on wheels ordinance, including adding the dwelling groups in the R2 zoning district with a development permit as provided for in attachment 1. And that concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Commissioner Duncan, do you have any questions?
I guess the one question that did come up is, can park trailers be converted to a tiny house?
So what we're looking at is park trailers.
Right.
As a tiny house, yes. As long as they meet a certain set of certification, the ANSI certification and or the National Fire Protection Agency certification.
So the exterior siding would be acceptable?
Correct.
On standard ones?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
As long as they are meeting the definition, all the design guidelines with insulation and the framing and so forth.
Okay.
Commissioner McIntyre?
So let's continue that conversation. So I loved when you had the slide up there of the three different options.
Sure.
You know where I'm talking about?
Yep.
Way early. So I'm not very attuned to this topic. So I understand that number one is a motorized, and that's sort of out of bounds at this point, as I understand.
Correct.
Okay. So now we're talking about the other two. So tell me the difference in terms of DMV, in terms of HUD housing standards, et cetera, between the second and the third.
So they both are required to be registered from the DMV. The third is the one that includes design standards, such as siding and residential type pitch roofs with the trim that would meet the definition of a tiny homes on wheels per this ordinance.
Well, I also saw that at the end there, the tiny homes, people said a 2x4 construction, and it's not 2x4 construction in these.
So
middle.
I don't know specifically how the red unit is constructed on the inside, but there are tiny homes on wheels available, and I did do some research that are built to that standard. 2x4 with the insulation.
Okay.
Correct.
And I know I want to hear from the public, but my other question is, so did this idea come out of a Board of Supervisors workshop? Is that what that did? Sort of they have their annual, what they're going to do this year?
Yeah, correct, it did. It also came out before that as a part of the most recent housing element implementation ordinance, which was, I think it came before your commission, I want to say March or May of last year, and was approved by the board in September. We did some public outreach, and a representative from Soul Learning Institute came to those meetings and said, hey, we're building these in Nevada County, but we can't use them, and we're selling them in Placer County, which passed an ordinance in 2022. So that's when the concept started rolling a little bit. But the concept of needing additional housing and being in a housing crisis has been for several years. So this, to answer your question directly, in 2024, this was direction from the board, correct?
And the direction was, just state it one more time for me, sorry.
Yeah. So the direction was to look at allowing tiny homes on wheels similar to other counties, such as Placer County.
And was there any direction in terms of the other RVs from this Board of Supervisors?
There was also direction to look at it and to do some research and as we move this forward, to provide some information to the board about what it would take if they decide to go that way. And so that's what we've done.
Okay, and I want to ask this question publicly because I asked you on the phone because I needed some clarification, because I was under, the only way I could explain it is to take a tough shed and turn it into some type of unit. And could you explain to the public what that might look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's more of a part, sorry, Commissioner McAteer, that's more of a part of the effort that's undergoing from the building department, also out of direction from the current board workshop to 2024, is to look for other, allowing other alternative housing types that don't entirely meet the California Building Code. I'll note that the County of Nevada did have a Title 25 ordinance, or a limited density rural owner-built housing ordinance for about 16 years. It went away in 2016. And so that allows for I can't get into it that much, but essentially it allows for a unit that doesn't meet all of the building code standards that's currently required. I know that I believe George from the building department is here. He could probably speak to that in more detail if you like, but essentially it may not be just your tough shed that you pick up at Home Depot and bring home. You might have to do some alterations to it to meet whatever standards that they come into place, but this is different than that. You know, this is allowing for these to be on wheels, allow for them to move around, so it's different. If you took one of these units, say in red.
But you're saying this is currently being discussed in the building department to
Correct.
Be able to bring that back to us or to someone?
So yeah, they're actually going through a public process and they're looking for public comments currently.
Okay.
And it'll likely go directly to the board because it's in the building code requirements and not the zoning ordinance, which is the purview of the planning commission. But it is being looked at.
And my final question is, before we hear from the public, is if I buy one of these tiny homes and put it on my property and I decide, you know, I want to get it off the wheels, off the carriage. So now it moves from being under DMV, or does it always stay under DMV? And then does it become real property when you take it off the wheels and set it down on a foundation or whatever you do? Does then it become an accessible unit on your property?
So Commissioner McAteer, it's my understanding that if you were to remove the wheels and put it on a permanent foundation, it would become a tiny home, and then it would be subject to the California Building Code. So I believe we do allow those in Nevada County if you can meet all the ingress and egress. And I believe at one point in time, previous building officials said around 360 square feet would be about the minimum or so. But
can you talk about the taxable nature of the two?
Sure. So I don't have a real great answer. I've been talking with or asking questions of our county assessor about this, and I actually reached out to Placer County's assessor yesterday, and they are not sure. So my assumption will be that you are making improvements to your home or to your property. You are required to get a building permit for electrical, septic, wells, and so that will add value. That will be assessed as a part of your property. I don't know the answer specifically to whether or not that your tiny homes on wheels will be taxed like a single-family home, but I do know that that is something that's being reviewed by our county assessor, and not to throw Placer County under the bus, but they passed their ordinance in about June of 2022, and the assessor didn't realize that they were allowing those.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Garth?
I have a couple of questions now, and then I'll have some follow-ups later that get further into the weeds. But I was wondering how permit fees would be assessed for these, given that they would have fewer or no building inspections.
The permit fees would be based on the grading for the driveway and the pad. And I forgot to mention is some jurisdictions require a paved or concrete pad. In Nevada County, we're allowing for a compacted gravel pad. So the building department will inspect that. They'll inspect the electrical connection, and so those fees will be for putting up a pedestal. And then they'll also do inspection of the tie downs and the anchoring system. So I believe those are the three. I don't know what the permit fees will be, but they'll be similar to a grading permit or an electrical permit today.
Thanks. And then I was trying to remember, I thought there was an ordinance that came out a couple years ago about like a cottage ordinance that reduced the code requirements for things like stairs, loft heights, things that kind of fall under this 18033 section of the California Health and Safety Code. I couldn't find it on the website. Can you tell me where
I would have to defer to our building official on that one. Come on up, George. Come on down.
Good afternoon. I'm George Shurik, Director of Building here for Nevada County. When those get inspected, these tiny homes will be inspected just like a manufactured home. They'll be inspected off-site, and then once they come to the county, we'll do the inspections on-site at the parcel. So the stairs and egress and all that will be inspected off-site, and they'll have to meet the proper standards at the state level, not the county level.
I guess my question is maybe a little bit outside of the purview of this proposal, but was there was an ordinance that reduced the requirements of the California Building Residential Code for site-built tiny homes? Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with site-built tiny homes because if they're built on a trailer, they have to meet DMV and state requirements because when they travel on the roads, they have to be limited in height, width, and so forth. So if a small home is built, say a 400 square foot home on a foundation, that would be under our purview. But if it's built on a trailer with wheels, that has to be under the DMV and state purview.
And then just to clarify, WUI requirements will be required for all units?
Yes.
Okay. And that would be handled through the the inspectors, off-site inspections? When would sprinklers be required or not required?
So in drafting this ordinance, we elected to not require sprinklers to help reduce costs.
And then the ingress and egress into and out of these tiny homes, is that required, and is it required to meet building codes?
Yes, there'll have to be probably some stairs or deck that is built alongside the tiny home but not attached to the tiny home. So it will meet residential code.
And then in regards to the all houses on wheels, what additional research or analysis is currently being conducted to look into those?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garth, so in looking at this ordinance, we looked at the definitions of recreational vehicles and RVs and tiny homes and park model trailers. I'm using tiny homes and park model trailers in the same. And it's essentially the design guidelines, which are the standards that would have to be removed. So that's the research that's been conducted.
But you're not currently conducting additional research to look into the addition of RVs?
I think what, as I explained in the staff report, is we understand how you can allow for all homes on wheels. What we are requesting is that we get direction from the board and that we do additional stakeholder engagement, and then we do additional research into the legality of allowing for dwelling groups and things like that without circumventing Special Parks Occupancy Act. So we'd be looking for more direction from the board.
Okay. And then can I just get a little bit of clarification as to the revision to the R2 zoning? Are you just adding the group dwellings to that allowable use?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. That's all.
Just a couple more questions. So this is allowed in all zoning then within the county?
Commissioner Millman, it would be allowed in any zoning district that otherwise allowed a single-family dwelling or an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay.
Or a second dwelling unit consistent with allowed density, or a dwelling group consistent with allowed density.
And I'm wondering where the 2x4 wall, like that's very specific in terms of construction style. Where did that come from?
As I previously mentioned, that's from the president of the Tiny Homes Association, Industry Association recommendation, and it was directly taken from Mendocino County's ordinance. It's also a design standard that makes it a tiny homes on wheel and not a recreational vehicle.
It seems like we could probably stretch that out so that if you used 2x6 or metal studs or,
I believe
right?
it's a minimum requirement. In fact, we do allow like SIP panels. There's other, but that's the minimum requirement.
Right.
So if you use 2x6, that would be above and beyond.
And so you've talked a number of times about how the tiny homes or the tiny homes on wheels are built somewhere else and then certified. Is it plausible to have a home-built tiny home on wheels?
Yes, you could, but you would have to get an inspector who has that certification from either ANSI or the National Fire Protection Agency to come and certify it and place an insignia on that dwelling that it meets those requirements.
Thank you. That's all I've got for right now. Are we ready to open up
Chair
for?
Millman, I had a follow-up question for Tyler. The county allows compassionate housing on parcels when the homeowner is ill and requires some level of care. Will this ordinance affect that ability, that they have to make improvements to that housing, or will that still stand alone?
Commissioner Duncan, this has no bearing on that. That would remain as an allowance. We also allow recreational vehicles as employee housing, and then we also allow them as security housing with a use permit.
So this could be a transition for some of those situations to become more permanent.
It could be, correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from my fellow commissioners? Okay, I think then we have arrived at the time for public comment. So what we'll do is have a line of folks who want, you'll have 3 minutes. State your name and address or kind of current location. And let us know if you are in charge or speaking on behalf of a larger group, in which case your time will be 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Durkin. I don't have an address because I live illegally in a trailer. I live in District 4, though, and I do represent the Sierra Roots No Place to Go project, which is a nonprofit organization serving homeless people in mainly Nevada City, but also throughout the county. My job as creative director of the project is to be the advocacy arm for our clients. And I'd like to, in terms of context, I am a stakeholder. I do live in an illegal trailer. I've lived there for 6 years at the invitation of my landlords. I would like to note that most homeless people are not addicts, they're not criminals, and they're not mentally ill. You don't see us because we don't present as homeless. Trailers and RVs, which is why I'm here, are the first and last resort. For people coming out of homelessness, it's the only affordable housing they can find. As a last resort, it's what's keeping some people from becoming homeless, specifically people on fixed incomes. With all due respect to the Planning Commission or Planning Department, I had a different interpretation of what happened at the January workshop on January 18th. I was under the impression that the staff was directed to look into tiny homes and RVs and trailers as such, because they are the first and last resort. They represent the only truly affordable housing in the county. Thousands of people do live in these things illegally, and they're always at risk of code compliance evicting them. Not evicting them, forcing them to relocate because only the landlord can evict them. Mr. Barrington said that reducing development costs, I don't see much reduction of development costs in this current ordinance. I don't see how it's going to increase supply too much because it's so expensive. And when you have the impact fees, the fire mitigation fees, the engineering fees, it gets extremely expensive, and it's way out of the reach of the people I represent. And I see very little regulatory flexibility. I see there's no fire sprinklers required. That's nice. We feel that the tiny home ordinance, the way it's written, is too restrictive. I see no regulatory flexibility because they require a well and a septic system. For people who are living in, if we had trailers or RVs, they can't afford that. There's other options, and it's been tried other counties. You can pump out a black water tank from an RV. You can bury a 55-gallon tank in the ground and pump it out under a contract so that you would be, we're not asking to relax any water or health and safety standards at all. We're totally in support of that. But asking for septic tank installation, that's like $20,000. People coming out of homelessness can't afford that. And what it represents is that trailers and RVs exist now, and many of them are not occupied. They're just sitting there. And I've talked to people who would rent if they didn't feel they were at risk of being fined, have tax liens on their property, and people want to comply with the law. So we are hoping for that. Now, they mentioned there was, I was hoping that they would explore the ordinance as the supervisors asked them to do. I'm pretty clear on that. They were asked to explore these things. Now, as a stakeholder, I was never contacted on this at all. And I'm very clearly a stakeholder. I've been working on this since 2019. And I'm happy to see there is some progress, but I don't think there's much. Now, you all have a petition of 523 signatures of people we asked to sign online. This has no legal weight. It's simply a sense of the community, and not everybody's sign is in this county because our goal, our long-term goal, is for the county to lead the state in setting a precedent to really, truly address the homeless crisis in a way that is meaningful. And we have supported the Grass Valley Chamber of Commerce, Nevada County Home Path, Nevada County Aging and Disability Resource Connection, of which I am a member. So while the ordinance is nice, it doesn't go anywhere far enough in addressing the problem. And I'm happy to entertain any questions you have. Otherwise, I'd like to stop and let other people speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Taylor, District 1. I concur that with Tom, I heard something different at the Board of Supervisors meeting in addressing the issues with tiny homes. I'd also like to point out that tiny homes was a passion of people to build and put it on a trailer and go from place to place, family or whatever. And the organization that Tyler's representing, that represents tiny homes, represents manufacturers for tiny homes. And I want to point out that at DeMartini, something like that probably would cost $70,000, $80,000. You're probably looking at $500, $600 a square foot, kind of similar to ADUs. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, if I had any advice right now for what you guys may advise the board is to simplify it. R13 walls, period. Whether it's steel stud, 2x4, 2x6, but recommend that it's an R13 wall. I don't think recommending dual pane windows for this is necessary, or a snow load is necessary. I think I would try to kind of pull it back and make it more affordable for the average person. I'm not even sure that a home on tiny wheels needs to pass some sort of a seal of approval by what the manufacturers of these homes are suggesting is necessary. I think the goal is trying to figure out how to get people into housing. I want to point out that since Laura has been on the board in 2020, there has been zero growth in Nevada County. 102,000 people were residing in Nevada County in 2020, and now, 2,000, and in 2020, there is the same number. So in 20 years, Nevada County has not increased its population. However, people have families, people have kids, people have places they need to be, and we're putting them in basements, we're putting them in RVs, we're putting them in. We have a housing crisis in Nevada County, and I think that this housing, Tiny Home on Wheels, was supposed to address the crisis that exists in Nevada County with not having housing. Currently, right now, you can live in an RV on a piece of property for 6 months. I would recommend trying to bridge a gap between all these different compassion or RV living if you're building a house, or try to somehow bridge it, make this a little bit simpler, try to figure out some ideas you guys might have in creating possibilities to make it more affordable for the folks that don't have housing, that are looking for housing. So I would recommend trying to carve this down and make it as simple as possible so that some people get in housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jeff Morrison. I live in Penn Valley. We used to have an extra room in our garage that we let some people stay there. It had no plumbing or anything. Well, it did have water. It didn't have a septic or toilet or anything, but there was a dry toilet or something like that that our guest used. And I don't see why a tiny home wouldn't be able to meet standards with a toilet that was not connected to a septic system. Other than that, I've never met Mr. Durkin. I know him only from what I read in the newspaper. I encourage you to take everything that he says very seriously. This is a crisis that can be worked on. I think this is a good first step, and I totally support everything that he says and thinks and is about to say. So he's got my full support, and I hope you're able to respond to all the comments that are brought up here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Mel Marshall, District 4, Newtown Road. 6.5 years ago, I stood here during the emergency meeting on the lack of affordable housing. I was coming to the tail end of a 3-year build of my own house, and I was required to remove a nice little yurt structure I had, which was legal to live in for the constant 3 years I was building my house. Much like this gentleman said, you can live in an RV if you have an open building permit. Again, I was required to take down affordable housing so that I could move into my nice housing. I was okay with that because I sold that to some hippies. It's up Northern California. I've got a new outboard. That worked out pretty good. What it didn't work out for is people who could have used that for a living, for a nice house. Could it use some structures, some requirements, snow load, egress? Of course it could. That option wasn't presented. I did mention Title 25, not you folks, to the board at the time. Question mark face, nobody knew what I was talking about. Thank you very much for putting that on the table. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit in Title 25. It's not hard to find on the internet. A lot of smart people in this room have worked hard to bring options. The word used to be yes. 2016 turned into no. Maybe with the hard work of all the people in this room and the passion, let's get to a maybe.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eric Brewer. My company, Eric Brewer Designs. Today I'm speaking as an affiliate of the Nevada County Realtors Association. I'm not a licensed realtor, I'm only affiliate. We are very much welcome to this ordinance because this will allow for greater density in the Nevada County. It will also allow for starter homes, starting out with $50,000 to $100,000 and being able to live on their land instead of spending $500,000. The concern, though, is combining the RVs that are motorized by themselves and being able to then drive them onto properties. I live in Chicago Park area in a very rural nature. We have had some issues of RVs that come and go and land squatters. Also, with people who have RVs on their property and are cooking meth and drugs. The ability for the county to police its own borders and inspect properties for safety concerns is integral to the safety of neighborhoods. By allowing an RV under its own power to come and go without inspections is something to be considered for the nature of our residences, the nature of sex trafficking, which are 17,000 sex trafficking cases in California alone, and the number of illegal marijuana farms. I would ask that the county reconsider utilizing the same ordinance for RVs under their own power, simply for the sake of safety and being able to police and inspect properties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amity Hotchkiss, and I'm a resident of Nevada County just as of 3-4 years ago. I moved from Sonoma County, and my story might help to understand my position. I own my own house, and I had a small house next door, ADU, telling my tiny house dwelling person that I'm sick and that she was my caregiver, because that's the only way you could have an accessory dwelling unit on your property. Therefore, a lot of us had illegal ones. It sat there for 5 years. It always struck me that the county could have actually asked me to plumb it and fix it in. And I tell this story because it's the future of housing. I now work with a group statewide, which is promoting tiny houses. It's also been approved in Bakersfield, or it's going that way. So I came up here thinking I would buy a house, but I can no longer afford a traditional family home. No, I've owned them 4 times before. I had to sell due to the aggressive agenda in Bay Area development. I had to get out of the situation. I moved up here. But after looking around, I could not buy a house due to unanticipated housing costs and challenges. Fire insurance being a primary one. Into the future, we need housing that's affordable and flexible, but still resembles and feels like a real house, built on land, preferably in clusters. That's the most exciting thing for myself, my daughter, and our friends, is that we could actually live on land, not under some antiquated nuclear family idea, but under the types of families and configurations that we now mostly live within. We're picturing a group of tiny homes with maybe a communal home in the middle, all completely legal and meets the requirements that you're discussing. They can be insured more easily for fire. They can have, as you said, ingress, egress, so that, and most importantly, they can be hauled away. My house, the 38-year-old house in Santa Rosa, could not be hauled away, and it also almost burned down 2 different times. So I'm speaking for the people like myself, elders who want to live in a group with our families again, and put them in different homes, though, for some reasons. So this would be good for elders, also the young 20s and 30-year-olds being squeezed by the economy, and also good in a larger sense for this county, where diversity is or should be a priority for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Maureen Graber. I'm in District 1. Homeowners in unincorporated areas of Nevada County are facing unprecedented challenges. I use the term homeowners loosely as we're paying high-cost mortgages every month. Our Nevada County property taxes are raised nearly every year, and the Cal Fair homeowners insurance costs, many policies between $9,000 and $15,000 a year, have become unaffordable for our primarily retired and fixed-income residents like me. The unincorporated area I live in does not have available fire hydrants. was recently included in the Nevada County Evacuation Study as an area with inadequate evacuation routes and is listed on the State Fire Marshal Fire Hazard Severity Zone map as very high risk. The county must address such infrastructure concerns when considering this ordinance. I recognize that providing much-needed tiny homes on parcels can work both for homeowners by providing us with a much-needed revenue stream for our spiraling homeowner costs, and the tenant by providing a safe and stable place to live. I ask that our Planning Commission add an ordinance requirement that the property owner live on site to ensure the tenant and equipment remain in compliance with county codes. I further challenge the Planning Commission to standardize a process to conduct a wildfire risk impact and evacuation assessment in coordination with OES, Nevada County Sheriff's Office, and CAL FIRE to determine ordinance impacts on resident safety and homeowners insurance availability and costs moving forward. Quite simply, if you add wildfire risk by adding to the population and add evacuation issues by adding to the population trying to evacuate, and now with mobile homes or mobile devices down these evacuation routes, you're really increasing the risk for the homeowners. So I request that you would look into that for us. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective as a homeowner in this unincorporated area of Nevada County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mark Hughes. I'd like to make 2 points. One is I have a son and his partner that have been trying to buy a house for a year and a half. I've been in real estate for 35 years. Never did I think that it was going to be almost impossible for them to find a house. So with 2 income earners, both, if you realize about this election, we're actually voting to give people a minimum wage of $18. So if you just do the math, if you have 2 people that are working at that level, they can't afford to buy a house. The challenging part about that is that if they go to find a cheaper house in the outlying areas, guess what happens? The fire insurance goes through the roof. So it offsets their income ratios. So if they come into the cities where insurance is lower, prices are higher. So this is a great solution for them. They're actually looking at a park model unit. And I think I applaud the county for reinstituting this or looking at this. Secondly, my wife and I bought a property outside of North San Juan about 5 years ago, and we did an extensive renovation. And we turned an old house into a bed and breakfast, into an Airbnb, and we can sleep up to about 20 people. The number one comment we have from people that come, group families, retreats, things like that, where people can come and be together as a group, is we wish you had more beds. We have more needs for beds, and we're turning business away because we can't have beds. Now, the crazy part about this is in North San Juan, we are in the sewer system. We have seven sewer hookups. 35% of my taxes go to the North San Juan Sewer District. So for me, I understand wanting to not do short-term housing, but I think this ordinance should include those people that are in the lodging industry, to be able to do this sort of thing for lodging, because the difference is when you come to our property with this, I can charge you $100 a night. If I am forced to build a stick-built property or building, it's going to be, over twice as much. The other thing that's important to take a look at this impact for people in the lodging industry, we pay a 10% TOT tax, and that is building the economic development of our area. So I would encourage you to consider making short-term housing available for those people in the lodging industry. Otherwise, I support limiting short-term housing because it takes away from how.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beth Moore. I live in the 3rd District. Currently, I'm a retired teacher of 25 years with NJU, HSD, and other school districts. I own a restaurant, Have Mercy on Me, for 6 years now. I've been a community activist. I've lived here over 40 years. I own a home on Rattlesnake Road. Before that, I was a single mom who left my family home in crisis. I went to school while I worked full-time in childcare with 2 little kids, and I lived in a trailer for a while. In fact, I stood in here about 30 years ago working to help make gray water legal in Nevada County as an alternative, and we haven't gotten a long ways since then. We're all currently voting. We vote by ballot. We vote with our money. We vote with how we support businesses and issues. I'm voting in favor of minimum wage. It hurts me as a restaurant owner, but I've seen so many of my special ed kids and their families really struggle to work, to find places to live, and all children and all young people, and even some people who, because of their own needs, will always work in special ed, and in minimum wage jobs, and I believe in that. And that's voting against myself in some ways. I feel the same way about support of trailers. I feel like there have to be alternatives for people. This is one tool that we have for now until we can develop better ways. It shows leadership on the part of the commission and the Board of Supervisors to look at alternatives that support people for now, because we all know homelessness is a huge issue in our state and across our nation. And it's a gradual change for accommodating and including all of us and all of the needs of our youth and people who, for various reasons, because they're vets struggling, because they are not completely employable, like so many people I've worked with who grow up and still need to find a place to live regardless of whether they work or whether they're on disability or whatever their needs are. This is a way to, at least for now, help to meet those needs. With regard to fire concerns, those trailers are already there. People are already living out there, and we're looking for a way to help them be legal, and then they can be part of fire safety planning and have a voice and be counted in road studies and making sure that we have good fire safety all over our county. Finally, I hope that you'll look at this not necessarily as a permanent thing, but as a good solution. Trailers are safe, they're well built, and you've already addressed standards for making sure that's addressed. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
I'm Sandra Saffron. I live in the area, and I see what was proposed for the tiny homes was certainly not, I don't know if it was to address homelessness, but it certainly is far from addressing that problem. Homelessness is a national problem. Rentals have gotten unaffordable for working people who are now the largest percentage of homelessness. Addicts and mentally ill are now a very small percentage of the homeless. Suggestions proposed by tiny homes are not broad enough. Tiny homes themselves are quite expensive and therefore not a solution for this massive problem. If there was an option for rent to buy, that would be one solution. But I think we have to think bigger. Tiny homes are one tiny solution. We must think bigger. People are living illegally in RVs, trailers, home parks, cars, campers, and other small homes. These homes must be legitimized. People need addresses. They need to feel like they're not living on the edge, ready to be harassed. There must be places for these homes and communities where they are not harassed by neighbors or the police. They could be put on private property and pay rent, which should be affordable and can be regulated. Surely communities own land that could be used for sanctioned homes on wheels like trailers, like trailer parks are. These communities of homes on wheels could have public bus routes nearby to reach work, grocery stores, and other necessities for living. I'm watching the time. If we are to solve this problem. We must act fast. Are these people going to be going into the winter with no legal place to be safe, dry, and warm? Solving these problems for the working homeless is much easier than solving the problems for the addicts and mentally ill people. I see I don't have a lot of time left, so I won't go into that. But I think this proposal today is so limited. I mean, to spend $50,000 or whatever it takes to have one of these and then go through all the processes is very expensive. They really have to have alternatives. Alternatives that are affordable. And I think that should be a plan, should be.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Weiberg, and I've lived here since 1980 and taught school for many, many years at Hennessy School. And I wrote notes, but I'm going to try not to read them. I've had the opportunity over the last few years to get to know a number of people that are homeless, that don't have a place to stay. And it's touched my heart, and it's made me look at things differently. You know, they're good people. Some of them are working hard part-time. And really, I found out that a large percentage of them are not on alcohol or drugs, which a lot of people look at it that way. But when you actually interact with people and you get to know these people week after week, it just changes the way you look at it. So I really love what you've done here. And for some people, this is going to be really cool. It really is. But I know for some of the people that are homeless today, we're probably going to have to figure out some other things that would be more realistic for them to get into. So I'm advocating that the members of your commission do make a decision today to pass the ordinance to legalize all homes on wheels, trailers, and RVs. I just care about people, and they're really no different than us in so many ways. So what we can do at a different level to help those people, that's where my heart is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dave Cash. I'm speaking for myself and for the majority of the group where I live. I bought an RV about 5 years ago, didn't realize this was an illegal act to live in. So now we're stuck on the county coming at the end of the month to say go somewhere. Where do we go? We can't park an RV on the side of the road. It looks tacky. You know, my camp right now, it looks like I'm camping. It doesn't look like I live there. I'm up and ready to go if there's a fire. I'm ready to go. That's the way it should be. So a law needs to be changed where, because we have a housing issue, I would love to stay living here. It's a beautiful place, and everybody helps each other. We need to fix all this. And we only got like a week. And somebody's going to come up and say, leave. Leave where? It'll take $100 to fuel my motorhome. I spent all of my savings on that motorhome. What do I leave it there? And then go down the street with a friggin' backpack? I work part-time. I only do 22 hours a week now. So for the community, some people, they are on drugs. That needs to stop. And the mess on the ground, that I do believe in. But those little tiny houses are cute. I did manufactured housing for many years with my dad. That would be under DMV law. And then when the wheels are taken off, it's still DMV, but with an inspection with the city. That is the way the law is, which is normal for make sure that it's hooked up and set properly. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nora Esders. I'm actually speaking on behalf of the Disaster Case Management Program at Connecting Point. We serve disaster survivors in Nevada County. That included the river fire, and now we're currently serving survivors of the severe winter storms. Our goal is to return folks who lost their homes or had severely damaged homes, return them to safe, sanitary, and secure housing. I absolutely support this ordinance, along with Tom Durkin proposing all houses on wheels, because I'd absolutely prefer to see a disaster survivor under a roof that's safe and sanitary versus getting kicked off their land. And then personally, I'm a working professional. I do live here in Nevada County. I make $35 an hour. I don't have student loan debt. I have a perfect credit score. This is my only homeownership option in this county. This would help me. It's not necessarily going to fix somebody that's experiencing homelessness, so we do need to look at other options. But this is one of the solutions, and I hope we continue to consider all options, because someone living in an RV versus someone sleeping on the street, I don't think we can argue which one is better. I'd rather see somebody in shelter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Judy Fellner. I live in Alta Sierra here in Grass Valley. I have to commend you all for taking a stab at putting this together for everyone. I think it's a really important and critical need for all current and new homeowners in our county. I, like the previous speaker, have a couple of daughters in their late 30s, early 40s, can't afford a house. And they're making good money. You know, when we look at something like that's, you know, close to a six-figure income and you can't afford a house, you know, there's a significant issue there. A couple of things that I just wanted to say is in the ordinance that you're proposing, what I didn't hear is the possibility of these homes being totally off-grid. The electric, PG&E and their rate increases, gosh darn. You know, I'm on a fixed income. I can't afford my house anymore because my electricity's up to $1,000 a month. You know? And if I had an option to be completely off-grid, not connected to the panel of PG&E, I'd be in a much better position. But I can't afford the connections, and you still don't get that good break when you have to be connected with PG&E, and that's our only source of electricity. So the option to be completely off-grid with both sewer and electric, I think, would be very, very beneficial as you look at this ordinance going forward. I just want to say as well that, you know, younger people coming up today don't want the big homes, you know, that we've kind of come accustomed to. They don't want it. They don't want to deal with yard work. They don't want to deal with maintenance. They're up, they're mobile, they're portable. They want portability. They need it. You know, you don't grow up and work in the same community as you lived in all your life anymore. Your community becomes 2,000 miles away or 1,000 miles away or 500, and you have to move. And you can't afford to go for another job. This really provides the option of those kinds of people to be more mobile and portable in their living situations as well. And I think that's a really healthy kind of a thing to look at. And then lastly, I think looking at a resolution or some sort of a solution for both homeless, our homeless population, we need to look at this, what you're doing, on a multi-pronged approach, not just step by step by step, because by the time we get 5 years down the road, we're in worse shape. So doing this now is great, but along with that, make sure, you know, that we're covering all the other aspects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Catherine Doolittle in Zone 1 with Heidi Hall. I am the Outreach Director with Nevada County Home Path, a community action group that has worked behind the scenes to build community awareness of the issues that face our unhoused neighbors and to try to connect dots for the different solutions that exist all over our state and our country. I want to thank the work that Tyler has done. He's always been such a positive, incredible leader, and I'm thankful for all of you for your ear today. Tom Durkin has brought awareness through his diligence and passion for those who live on the near constant edge of fear, as they are not safely permitted to reside in campers and trailers. And this, for the majority, is their only housing option. We strongly encourage the board to give consideration of these critical needs as well. Our wish is that the expansion of inclusion for campers and trailers for our most vulnerable can be done within the same time frame as this amendment for tiny homes on wheels, and that will require without any delay. We have a compassionate county. I'm so impressed with all the people here today. Their hearts are real, and it's touching me, and I'm sure it's touching you. We need to think outside of the box. We need to do it as quickly as we can. As a very famous goal says, winter is coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judy Wheeler. I live in Grass Valley. I don't know my district. I told Tom I wasn't going to speak today because this is very far out of my comfort zone. But I would like you to consider adding RVs and trailers to this ordinance. I was homeless for 5 years, and the only thing that they could offer me for housing was to go to all the apartment complexes and get on a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year waiting list and just wait. And in waiting, a friend of mine and I, we both lived in a tiny little Nissan Versa, and we were always moved along one place to another, and from that, always having to sleep in a seated position. My legs are gone now. I'm disabled from that. But it would have been nice to have a trailer or an RV or something like that. A friend of mine in Napa had offered me the use of a trailer. We had friends with land, but that could never come together because it was not legal to do it, and our friends were afraid. And I also have friends of mine that are senior citizens. They were 30-year homeowners, lost their home, and they lived in an illegal trailer. And she told me they felt like fugitives. They're looking out the windows all the time, watching that no one follows them home and all of that. So I would just like to see maybe RVs and trailers added to this ordinance. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jake Keller, and I just want to add my perspective as a young person moving to this county. I've lived here for 5 years now, and I love it. It's a beautiful place to be, and it's entirely out of my price range. It's very hard to afford to live here, and it's hard to start a family here. I recently just got married, and I live at the Ananda Communities, and so I work for a nonprofit, and even to live there, to live simply, you're still stuck in this paradigm of paycheck to paycheck. And it's hard to get ahead. It's hard to start a family. It's hard to give back to your community and to really express your full potential when you are in that paycheck to paycheck paradigm. So even with this proposal, I think it's a great step in the right direction. And I really appreciate all of you putting your minds to this and putting your hearts into it also. And I just want to echo what was said by earlier speakers, to find ways to make it more affordable, adjusting the building standards a bit. Obviously, we all want to be safe. We all want to live in healthy spaces. But to live in a tiny home with only several hundred square feet, to buy something that's pre-made, nearly $80,000, another 20 or so to have your septic system put in, fire clearing, road access on top of that, you're still getting into $130,000, $120,000, which still puts you in that paycheck to paycheck. It's still out of range for people. I have a friend who's a builder, who's just finishing building up a house he started last summer. And in his budget, he had allotted something like $2,000 for permit fees. When he actually went to get the permit fees, it was closer to $12,000. And he's an experienced builder. He knows what he's doing. But the prices had risen nearly $10,000 from his one build to the next. So if you can investigate, not just in these tiny home codes, but in all the building codes, where these fees keep creeping in. Another house that was built when I moved out here, again, a small house, nearly got to $500,000, and it was nearly $60,000 in fees before they even broke ground, which is just unacceptable, you know, for any of us. And I just want to finish by saying thank you. I think anybody who dedicates their life to public service like this really has the interest of the people at heart. And it's inspiring to see that this conversation is happening, and that you guys are putting your minds to this. You know, this is a representative government we live in, and I think it's clear what the people are looking for. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Travis Duckworth. I'm owner of Soul Tiny Houses and Soul Learning Institute. We teach community members how to build houses, grow food, and keep money here in our community. And we do custom, eco-friendly, non-toxic tiny houses. Obviously, this is important to us. I don't have anything to add. That I'm not echoing what's been said. Let me just do this. You know, there is so much that this doesn't do. It doesn't address homelessness. It doesn't address the fear of living in an RV. It doesn't address having a safe place to call just shelter. And there's so many things in here that we can do to help mitigate those costs of utilities. I keep hearing that. I would love to see environmental health. You know, I teach composting toilets. I don't want composting toilets to be passed necessarily because it's so easy to mess up and screw up our waterways. But incinerator toilets are a great, you know, off-grid option. Solar, not connected to the grid, is a great off-grid option. Taking away some of those big expenses is huge. And, you know, even though this doesn't do everything, what I do see it doing is it's addressing people like the woman who spoke earlier. It addresses people that are unable to afford the $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 house. We can build these, we can put these on a single property, and we can get that down to half of what it is to find your minimum house right now of high quality. It's allowing for communities. It's allowing us to do co-housing communities, which we're working on, so that we can get that down to half of what the cost is for construction right now. There's so many demographics this doesn't address, such as our homeless and our most vulnerable. And there's so many that it does address: our retired, our single income, our elderly population, our young kids. I'm a business owner, obviously, but I'm also an old teacher that saw my kids unable to stay in this community that they were born and raised in. It addresses some of these groups that can't afford $500,000 and $600,000, but they can't afford $100,000 to $300,000 homes that are built at a high standard, and that's what we're hoping for. So, you know, in the scope of things, there's so much more to do. And there's so many more demographics to address. And this is an easy win to be able to get some of our demographics and some of our people that are living and working and providing in this community some homes at a reasonable rate and get into home ownership. So I have a little bit of time. I'm more than happy to answer any questions from that perspective of the manufacturer. To speak to you, there's Appendix Q you mentioned in the building code, and that allows for homes under 400 square feet. And they have some leniences to standard construction, particularly with lofts, stair tread, rise and run, and things like that. It's just a slightly less enforced standard because it's such a small square footage, and that's already in place through our building code. That's Appendix Q for permanent homes under 400 square feet. But if there's anything else I can answer, I'm more than happy to.
Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Timothy Dimmick, and I reside in Sonoma County and part-time in Nevada County. I was a public servant for 20 years, serving students at juvenile hall, probation camp. So I know how it is to be on the fringe, how it is. And so I encourage you to pass this ordinance. There are some parts that need to be massaged, obviously. But if government could come to the people on this one, it would be a big thing, because economic disparity in our country is huge, and this does one little step to bring us to a little bit of equity. So thank everybody for coming out here today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all your footwork. Pass it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Paul Shorts. I live in District 1. I would throw my hat in with everything Tom's saying. I became familiar with this issue by reading Tom's stuff in the Union. And since then, I've started to look around, and there are so many trailers in this county. I mean, they're everywhere. And I started to look at, well, how many of these trailers have cars parked next to them? And most of them do. So there's this huge problem. The county can be helpful by including RVs in this initiative, but also in helping the existing RV homes find some way to be legal. An example would be to allow them to hook up to a existing residential septic system just by creating a port, and they can tap into it like at an RV park. That is not legal right now. If I had a trailer in my driveway, I would not be allowed to install a port to dump the waste into my own septic system. That should change. And they should be allowed to attach to existing water system at that residence. The other thing that might do is for people who can't afford to buy a home today, it might they could put in a pad of compacted rock. They could put in the waste connection to their existing septic system. They could put in the electrical connection for the trailer and water. They could rent that pad out to someone with a trailer that needed an affordable place to park it. And then that would subsidize their mortgage. Anyways, this needs to be considered more widely, adding RVs and things other. In all the times I've been looking around for trailers, I've never seen one of these in the county. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak today?
Hello, my name is Robert Trent. I am Executive Director of Sierra Commons, which is a business incubator in Nevada City, former Executive Director of the Economic Resource Council, Business Person of the Year of Nevada City. I am hearing over and over again about the impact of shortage of housing to our overall economy. And I feel like this is a really simple step that can be taken. I mean, it might be complicated to implement, but it's a clear step to be taken to positively impact the overall economic situation in Nevada County. We're heading into some rough times, and it's a repeated theme in all of the meetings about lack of housing. So I am a supporter of this, and I believe for all of the reasons to provide equitable housing for people, one, but also the overall economy, and that's going to have a really strong effect on the overall economy. So that's my feeling on it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in public that would like to make a comment on this item today? Okay. Seeing none, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And wonder if we can take a 10-minute break. Okay, let's move to the next step. We're back in session. So I think at this point, is there anything that staff wants to address in the public comment?
Absolutely. Madam Chair, members of the commission, there's a few things staff wants to address. First off is regarding the board workshop. The direction was to look at other ordinances for tiny homes on wheels and also to analyze whether alternative housing can be permitted as well, so RVs. So we did look at that, and based on the direction of the board, it was to develop a tiny homes on wheels ordinance and not specifically to develop a all homes on wheels ordinance at this time. I'd be a little naive in saying we aren't continuing to research other avenues. When I responded to Commissioner Garst earlier, I was on an email chain just the other day with the director of, sure, I was on an email chain the other day with the director of behavioral health, Health and Human Services, as well as CDA about a recent adoption of a camping ordinance in Bend, Oregon. So these things are continuing to be looked at. The intention of this ordinance is not to solve the homeless crisis. It's to look at another tool in the toolbox to provide for more affordable housing in Nevada County. There was a question about whether other types of construction materials would be used. So specifically framing, and that's again a 2x4 is a minimum. There was a question about off-grid. The county has an off-grid policy for electrical that allows you to go off-grid. So that is an allowance potentially for these units. I don't believe there's any allowance at this particular time to look at alternative septic. That has to meet certain standards. It's regulated by environmental health. I think that's so like I mentioned, the camping ordinance, we're also looking at Title 25, the limited density rural housing. So this is a multi-pronged effort. This is just one step towards reaching that. And generally, unless the commission found that I missed anything or if we missed any questions, I'm happy to try and address those, but those are the ones that kind of came to mind as the most pertinent. We did engage the community as a part of this process, got several letters from Tom and have spoken with him. So again, like I mentioned, this is really a first step in the right process, and in order to allow for all homes on wheels, I think that further engagement to the community would be required. And by the community, I mean neighborhood associations and special interest groups, beyond just the folks that are here today, but really appreciate and compassionate to their concerns. But anyways, that's my response for now.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have other questions?
I'd like a
Commissioner Duncan?
clarification. Yes. Tyler, on the septic, if there's existing capacity to add another unit, would it not be okay to do so?
I don't want to speak for environmental health, but I believe recently with our changes to accessory dwelling unit requirements, that the existing septic is that if it had capacity, could be used. So the idea, the accessory dwelling unit ordinance is set up that way.
Well, my experience in building permitting accessory dwelling units is that environmental health requires a separate septic tank for an accessory dwelling unit, but not for a junior ADU. But that's at least my experience. So
that ordinance was changed in 2023.
Okay.
And so if you say you built a 4-bedroom septic for a 3-bedroom house and you are putting in a new ADU, that was 1 unit, as long as that septic system had capacity and you could prove it, you wouldn't have to put in that extra tank, and you may potentially need to add like additional leach line area. But that is a requirement that was passed last year.
There was another question about water. If the existing water system could service that unit.
I don't know I'd imagine if you had adequate gallons per minute to serve both units. Typically, a residential unit in Nevada County requires a minimum of 3 gallons per minute. If you go below that, there's water storage requirements.
Right.
But I don't know that answer. I know environmental health is, I believe, is listening in, so if they wanted to come down and answer that specifically, they could. But I would think that if you have adequate gallons per minute. Oh, there's Claire. So the question is, do you want to sum up? This is Claire Chappell with Environmental Health. So the question specifically was whether you could utilize existing water resources on a site, so a well, to serve both units.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. Can you hear me? Sorry. I believe at this point we're thinking of it like an ADU, so you could absolutely share the well and the septic, assuming that they're properly sized. Typically for an ADU, it's required to have 3 gallons per minute in addition to any other dwelling would increase by 3 gallons per minute. But it can be as low as 1 gallon per minute if there's extra storage. So.
Thank you. Capitalize on that. Since you're here, could you please stay for a minute? Because I think that, the big problem, I penciled this out, and it's very costly to put one of these units in. Very costly, and I'm sort of concerned about that. So some people said, how do you drive down the cost on this? So my question is there any such thing out there in terms of a holding tank for sewage? That we put a stipulation that says, you need to be putting a septic line in eventually, and you've got 3 years, and you put a holding tank that is then pumped until you've got some capital. But the initial outlay of capital for these is going to be huge. So, a $15,000 septic system is a big cost. I understand water, I understand power, and now that we know that you go off the grid if you want, but I don't want to play around with water or power, but I do think there's something to be able to be said about some type of a holding tank that could go in initially and then allow people some timeline to get their septic system in.
I know that the LAMP it's called
the what?
The Local Area Management Plan. It's
Okay.
basically the regulations for septics in Nevada County. There is a section for holding tanks. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly if there's a timeline or when they can be used, but I know there is definitely a chapter for that.
So then I'm interested in sort of pursuing that, okay? And I don't know that we can pursue it since you know the regulations much more than I do, but I tend to support, I totally support the whole tiny home deal, but I also support the idea of what means could we do to help get these things in place under good health and safety regulations, and one of them is this idea of a holding tank.
Yeah, thank you. There's also just one more thing. Some people that have difficult soils, so they have maybe done soil testing and they find out that their system's going to cost a lot of money. They will sometimes be able to find an easement onto an adjacent property. So that would be another option.
Well, that's a lot. That sounds like now you've got electricity to pump the sewage somewhere, unless it's a gradient. So that was my question for you regarding the holding tank. Thank you. I have other questions, though, whenever. Laura, you have more? No. Okay. So off the grid is okay. Now talk to me about people doing this for an Airbnb, Tyler.
Commissioner McAteer, the intention here is to provide for long-term housing and to solve the housing need, not to provide for commercial expansion. And it's very similar to the Board of Supervisors in 2019 when adopting new regulations for the accessory dwelling units, elected to add that deed restriction. And so in the spirit of providing housing for locals on a long-term basis, that's why that deed restriction was pushed forward.
Okay. Next explain how much would a permit fee for the average tiny home be to be able to, you've bought it, you've dragged it up here and or now you've done some grading or whatever. So I don't know if the building department or you can help with that.
This would be a building department question.
Okay, great. Thank you for sticking around. So you understand the question, I'm sure, completely.
Well, if it's to permitting, the building permit is not just a building permit fees. Obviously there's school fees, there's road fees and so forth. So when you talk about a building permit, are you talking about what the building department's going to charge for this? Or are you going to talk about the whole?
I mean, I understand, being the school superintendent, that since it's a mobile vehicle, that it's exempt from school fees. Is that the case?
No, that is not the case.
That's not the case anymore.
That has not been the case for the last at least 5 years that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, I've been retired for more than 5 years.
It's probably been longer than that, sir.
Uh-huh.
Those fees are set by the board, as you know.
Yes.
And so the fees for the school are set by the school board and so forth. So that's not something that we, as a CDA, can just waive away.
Okay, so I understand that. So let's just talk about the County of Nevada in terms of their fees.
Including development fees, like traffic impact fees. I think those are a large chunk of new residences.
I do know that per state law, you aren't allowed to collect road impact fees for accessory dwelling units under 700 square feet. So all these would fall into that. I don't know how that specifically applies to, like, if it's the primary unit or not, but I do know that that provision applies to accessory dwelling units.
But on the fees that we would charge for this tiny home on wheels would be very similar to the manufacturing fees. So we would do an inspection for the anchoring of the unit. We do an inspection for the electrical hookup, and then depending on the septic situation, if there's electric pumps or something, we would do that. But then the EH team, the environmental health team, would go out and do inspections as well to make sure the well or the septic is meeting their requirements. So you're probably looking at a total of 6-ish inspections, assuming they all pass first glimpse, because if we have to keep going back, then that drives up the cost a little more as we are fee-based.
So give me a ballpark. What's 6 trips out to the property?
Well, on the building department side, we're about $180 per trip.
Okay.
So so just round up and make it simple math, $200.
Sure.
And something around, something along those lines. Okay. But that doesn't address, if they've got grading and they have a driveway that's long. So I don't want to tell you there's one magic answer.
So it's I'll say a few $1,000s in fees is a fair assessment, because somebody just told me it was for $12,000 for something.
And again, that's probably was for some other fees not related to the building department or community development agency. Okay. They'd be going back to the school fees and other ancillary fees.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just to piggyback on that, so if you're actually installing this as basically your ADU, right? So your driveway's in place, et cetera, you put in a pad and you're connecting your utilities. If I were budgeting this, then if I put $3,000 in my budget, then I'm good on fees? Or we think that it's closer to 10? Just what should go in a homeowner's or a tiny homeowner's budget for that?
Commissioner, I think we're getting outside of the Land Use and Development Code. The fees are set by the Board of Supervisors, so we're looking at a land use code issue, so I can't tell you specifically off the top of my head what the fees will be and how much someone should budget.
Thank you very much. My next question, Tyler, thank you, sir, is grouping these. Is there any sense from you and the department to be able to create some zoning that groups these so that a developer comes in and says, I want to put a dozen tiny homes in? What's the game plan for that?
So as a part of this ordinance, we're looking at allowing these tiny homes on wheels as a dwelling group consistent with allowed density. So a good example I've been using is if you have Ag 5 zoning and you have 20 acres, you'd have density for up to 4 of these units. You'd also be allowed to an ADU. So that'd be 5. That does require a use permit in most zoning districts. Part of this proposal would allow it also in R2 zoning, which allows up to 6 units per acre, or 6 dwellings per acre, 8 in the sphere of influence. And We're looking at allowing that with a development permit, and depending on the number of units, the county's code allows for different types of processing for that.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Garst.
I have a lot of questions. Both micro and macro, so maybe I'll start with the micro questions that relate to some very specific language in this proposed ordinance. One of the comments or questions I had is, I was wondering, it lists for the concrete pads that, for Portland cement concrete, over 6 inches of Class 2 aggregate base is required underneath them. Typically for a slab, I think that's 4 inches. So I'm just curious if we can amend that to be consistent with slab, under slab requirements, reduce that?
I have parking areas for tiny homes on wheels shall utilize a paved surface or a gravel surface.
I'm looking at section 10A.
Me too. For purposes of this subsection, a paved surface shall be a minimum thickness of 2 inches and 4 inches of reinforced Portland cement over 6 inches. I see.
Can we just change that to 4 inches to be consistent with building code?
Yes.
My other question was, in terms of the materials, it excludes interlocking metal sheathing. Would that include standing seam metal siding or corrugated metal siding?
I don't believe that's interlocking. It lays on top of itself.
I mean, standing seam typically is an interlocking.
Okay, right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we could look at that in greater detail, but I think the idea is not for a single large sheet.
Okay.
But yeah.
Because that would be more in line with like an RV type
Correct.
material. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to have some clarification around that and not prohibit that requirement.
Yep.
In the same section under E, it is requiring that all mechanical equipment be screened from view of public right-of-way. I find this to be inconsistent with other primary residence or accessory dwelling units that are not required to have that equipment screened from public right-of-way.
Okay.
So I'd like to propose striking that section or that requirement. I'm curious if there was like a reason why that was included, maybe that I'm not clear.
I believe it's consistent with the other ordinances that were used as an example, and if that's the pleasure of the entire commission, we could strike that as a part of the ordinance that goes to the board.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's see if I had other specifics here. That was it for my micro level. In terms of macro questions I have, I was wondering if you've come across any other jurisdictions that do allow all houses on wheels. I know you just mentioned perhaps one in Portland.
So my understanding is Oakland, City of Oakland, and the City of Portland are 2 cities that allow this.
As a option for an ADU, an RV.
I didn't review it in great detail.
Okay.
That was just the information I was provided.
Okay. So just from my understanding, RVs or trailers are allowed as permanent residences in mobile home park zoning districts. Is that correct?
In special occupancy parks, I think you can occupy a mobile home or a trailer. In mobile home parks, you can have a park model trailer. But I don't know all the ins and outs of that. But that's my understanding, yes.
How much area of the county is zoned as, what was the specific zoning? Mobile home parks, the special?
I don't know that answer, but we do have a number of mobile home parks along Highway 49 that have the mobile home park designation.
Okay.
There's an RV park on Harmony Ridge that also has that. There's an RV park in Hirschdale. There's a number of them.
One of the items that we're voting on is approving the group housing in R2, which to me seems like maybe that is an increase in density. Can you speak to that?
It would be the same density that's currently allowed. but it would allow for these, wouldn't have to be multifamily housing through a use permit.
It'd be detached, it could be detached. Is
Correct.
that- Okay, that's the difference between, okay,
Yep.
understood. I think that's all I have in terms of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, a couple more. Somebody said that 6 months currently in a trailer or an RV is legal, and then somebody else said 3 years. What is the actual?
So you can camp in your RV between April and October for 90 days, consecutive, I believe, or non-consecutive days. And then with a building permit, open building permit, you can get a temporary occupancy permit to live in the RV while you're building your house. We also, again, allow them as security housing for 3 years with a use permit on a public use, and then also you can stay in them permanently as employee housing for 6 months a year, actually, not permanently, but it's for 6 months.
And there's also caregiver housing, that if you demonstrate the need for a caregiver, you can live in an RV, or the caregiver can live in an RV for 6 months at a time. So that's another option.
Thank you.
Can I ask another question associated with that? I don't think in all of those cases you're required to be connected to a septic system. Is that, can you clarify in which cases you would, in which you wouldn't?
With the caregiver, you are required to be connected to the septic system. I don't know about when you're under construction. We'd have to look at that.
Yes, if you're the builder, homeowner builder, and you're living there, we would require you to be hooked up to water and well, or some type of, septic or sewer system, yes.
That's correct, confirm. I confirm that with the zoning ordinance.
And if you're in the cases of being allowed to stay on your own property in an RV for 90 days, you would not need to be connected to septic or sewer?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Have reinforcements arrived?
Oh, no. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Really quickly, your question to hooking up to septic in these situations.
I'm sorry, can you identify?
Oh, sorry, Amy Irani, Environmental Health Director. I apologize.
Thanks so much.
You bet.
Welcome.
Apologies. Just to clarify, if in these temporary types of situations, the individual that is occupying the RV opts to have somebody service the RV and pump out the black water tank, we would allow that as well for that temporary time frame. But they would have to show proof of that they are having that service done. They'd still need a potable water hookup, however. I hope that helps.
So it does. So that was my question about how long someone could have a tank, we'll just call it that. And is there outside of what's currently available, which is 6 months, is there an ability of anything else to be able to extend that length?
So if you look at it, thank you very much. I appreciate the question. If you look at it from a permanency standpoint,
Yes.
we're going to look at it from a permanency standpoint. So if this is temporary, and let's say the temporary is going to be a maximum of 2 years,
Right.
and they agree to have their system pumped, which could be very expensive, to have somebody come out and pump the black water tank, because they're usually not significant, say in an RV or another type of structure. So
But if they had it if we requested that it be for a couple of years, that they're allowed to do this, and in the process, get their septic system approved and get moving towards a septic system, is that kosher in your world?
certainly, as long as there is a mechanism by which we prevent any type of public health hazard
Obviously.
with an overflow.
Obviously.
Yeah, absolutely, if they have that agreement.
Okay.
And they can show us that's happening.
Thank you very much.
That was helpful.
Okay, so moving to something slightly different. Tyler, how many of these, based on the experience that you've seen in the other jurisdictions, would you anticipate that we would?
As I previously mentioned, I think I heard that maybe Placer County has done 2 since they passed our ordinance a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So I'm not sure how many we would see.
And say somebody installed one, is long-term rental allowed, or is this an ownership only?
It's a long-term rental is allowed.
And is it long-term rental is allowed if the owner lives on the property, or the whole thing could be?
There's no occupancy requirement.
And could they put in the pad and then actually rent that out to somebody who brought their tiny home with them?
I would imagine if that tiny home could meet all the standards of the ordinance, they could.
Okay. All my questions, thank you.
So as you know, I'm sort of the person that says, where can we come with some compromise here on this? So I think this is a great idea, but I'd like to see some amendments to it if we could. The first is that I think that we need to encourage the Board of Supervisors to direct planning relative to other RVs and other housing. I mean, I just feel like, I know a lot of people want us to go do and expand it tremendously, but I don't think that's what the Planning Department has done today, nor are they prepared to be able to address let's just sort of open it up to other RVs and also, because that's not what the board, as I understand it, Tyler, told you. Is that correct?
I would say it's certainly correct to a certain extent.
Okay.
But that we're also looking at those other alternative housings as a part of this.
So my motion, an addendum to it would be that we encourage the Board of Supervisors to decide where they want to go with other forms of available housing. So that's one. The second is I'd like to sort of allow for a 3-year program where you could put a septic tank, I should say a holding tank for 3 years to allow the person over that timeline to be able to connect properly to a septic system. I'd also like to see the county do something relative to encouraging developers to be able to group these and put them, feasibly in a larger setting. So those are sort of, and I think we need to put in the ordinance that they can go off the grid or some little caveat that says refer to the off the grid.
I believe that there is language in there in section 12B that states, unless otherwise designed to be self-contained to provide equal electrical accommodations. So that, I think, is already, at least electrical off-grid is covered in the ordinance currently.
Correct. And I don't want to speak for Amy, but I don't know that the Planning Commission has oversight over the environmental health lamp.
No, I understand that. I'm putting this in as a caveat to that. So please, I'm not here to tell the environmental health what to do, but I do think we're trying to give some direction to the Board of Supervisors as to where to go, and it would help them understand what the steps are to be able to change this. Amy?
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that definitely when we're talking about installing a holding tank, okay, which is wholly separate from the mobile unit's capacity of holding tank, you are speaking then, I would assume, to an in-ground tank.
Yes.
You're not speaking to an above-ground.
No, in-ground tank.
Okay. Then the capacity of that tank would be determined on the number of folks residing.
Living, sure.
And such. And then that tank, of course, would have to be under contract to be pumped, as to not create a situation where there's an overflow. Right. When the permanent septic system goes in, that tank would need to be abandoned.
Right.
Okay.
We're on the same page. I'm just trying to reduce the cost of this initial cost for these people trying to get into tiny homes. And that's the goal here. And so I think my direction is, if in passing this today, is to be able to say, would the Planning Department work with Environmental Health to come back to the Board of Supervisors with this option for them? Is that fair, Tyler?
That is certainly fair.
Okay. So those are sort of where I am. So I'm listening to what you'd like to say.
I think that I kind of see the tiny home ordinance, tiny home on wheels ordinance, and all homes on wheels being a little bit different. And I think that what our recommendations here today could address both, with maybe some specific, some of the thoughts I had in terms of allowing all housing on wheels is in line with what is currently allowed for people building a home, is maybe offering 2-year period permits for an RV. This might be unpopular with the comments that we received today, but I don't love the idea of RVs as being considered permanent housing. But I do see the need for people who are maybe in transitional periods of their lives or need some cheap, affordable housing quickly to have an option for that. But again, I don't love, I think these tiny homes are maybe more geared towards permanent housing, and all housing on wheels is kind of more temporary in nature, in my opinion. I think also there's a land use of low-intensity campgrounds, which specifically excludes RVs from their use. And I think this is an area where we could recommend some expansions on an existing zoning, an existing land use that might provide some relief for people who need temporary housing where they would be able to rent, say, like with the land use, you could establish a low-intensity campground that could allow RVs, which would essentially sort of make a zoning allowance for additional sort of mobile home parks, if you will, of sorts. I think that seems like an interesting idea to me. That kind of works within the existing land use development code infrastructure. Those were some ideas that I had.
Well, in my experience, government doesn't move very quickly. I mean, they identify a problem, and then it's like, well, what do we do about it? And I think this is a move towards doing something about it, that there is a crisis in the county, and we need to address it. But I think there's several groups that would benefit from it being addressed. And I don't know that this ordinance necessarily helps everyone. But it is a step in the right direction. And I think as you presented in the staff report, it's a beginning. And it's to be probably perfected over time, because I don't think any of us really are smart enough to figure it out. And I don't know those other counties that jumped into the game and passed ordinances necessarily know what to do. And I think there may be some more unique needs in some of our counties that aren't always the same in others. But this one that we're looking at today looks to me, you need some money. I mean, you cannot come at this with nothing. Someone needs to contribute towards making it legally habitable for people who this is what they want. And, there are programs that the county could apply that would help people in these situations. Community development block grants, springs to mind immediately, or community action grants, that there are resources the county could use. The other one is that maybe there are people who, they're never going to be able to get to the standards of addressing all the improvements in order to be legal on a private parcel, but maybe the county could look at designating funds towards the purchase of a park, developing it as a park, so that people who truly are one step away from parking on public lands that, they were recently routed out of off the Highway 20 corridor, they would have a spot. But I think that's within the county's ability to address if they feel that is a strong desire. But I think this is a huge step from, in terms of where I've been with the county. I mean, not that long ago, we were actively pursuing K-housing occupants and saying, you know, this is an illegally constructed dwelling, and, you know, you can't do that. You're out of here. And people did live in fear, and I think people are living in fear now that they're going to be discovered and routed from where they live. And this is an attempt to get them there, but I don't think this is a panacea for all. Some just don't have the resources to make the improvements. I think the comments from my other commissioners have been very good and insightful, and maybe some of those tweaks can be made before it's finally presented to the Board of Supervisors. But I would support passing this ordinance today and getting it moving, because otherwise we just sort of sit and dither, which most good people in this community can, you know, accuse the county of doing. Local government does not respond quickly to the needs.
So I'll make a motion then to approve the environmental action recommended to the Board of Supervisors to find the ordinance categorically exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15305. And then we'll talk about the project action second.
I second.
How do you vote? Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAteer?
Yes.
Commissioner Garst?
Yes.
And Chair Millman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Then I'll make a motion to, for project action, recommend that the Board of Supervisors adopt the attached tiny homes on wheel ordinance, including adding dwelling groups in the R2 zoning district with the development permit attachment 1. But I'd like to add a couple amendments to it as what we talked about. One is to work with environmental health to come up with some type of holding tank that allows a tiny home owner to, for a few years, I'm suggesting a few years, have this holding tank, and then as they proceed towards getting a septic system in, which will alleviate a huge upfront expense for many of these people. And then I'd also like to, I really would like to add that off-the-grid supplement right on there somehow, okay? So it refers to how you go off the grid on this item. And then thirdly is I'd like to I have two more things. One is I'd like some type of direction from the planning department to the Board of Supervisors regarding the idea of grouping. I think we need some game plan as to how you can group these together to make it more efficient and more affordable, and I don't know what that zoning would look like or what that action would look like, but I really believe when you go to the Board of Supervisors, that would be really beneficial for them. And then finally, I'd like you to encourage the Board of Supervisors to give direction to the Planning Department and the Commission regarding expansion of alternative housing.
I'd like to add a couple of revisions as specified earlier.
4 inches and
Yes.
that sort of thing.
And not requiring screening and adding metal siding as an allowable.
I think the screening should match whatever the other code is.
It's not required to screen it with site-built buildings, is my understanding.
Correct.
Okay.
But skirting would still be, tell me the difference between which.
I believe Commissioner Garst is reflecting on the requirement that all mechanical equipment be screened from view.
I see.
Versus traditional dwellings where you can have like a
Got it.
HVAC unit outside, that sort of thing, correct?
That's correct. And skirting would be required for, say, a site-built building that didn't have a perimeter
Got it.
foundation. So those are all consistent with building the current code.
Thank you.
And 4 inches of gravel.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Do you have a summary, perhaps, of what we just said?
You bet. So in the motion by Commissioner McIntyre, he asks that we continue to work with environmental health to come up with some type of temporary holding septic system as a part of this ordinance, I believe. To put, which I would believe would go in section 12 or item 12 of the ordinance, recognition of the off-grid program. To come up with allowance for grouping. I would note that the ordinance does allow for grouping through that dwelling unit consistent with density, but we can highlight that. to also to encourage the board to have the county, including planning and the planning commission, to continue to look at other alternative housing types. And then for Commissioner Garst, changes specifically about the amount of gravel required under asphalt, which is 4 inches instead of 6, to allow for corrugated or Corten steel siding. I think that's a pretty simple one. And then also to not require screening of mechanical on-the-ground equipment.
Okay.
Add standing seam siding as well. Thank you.
Do we have a second?
So that's my motion.
I second.
How do you vote? Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner McAteer?
Yes.
Commissioner Garst?
Yes.
And Chair Millman?
Yes.
Thank you.
I wanted to make a last closing comment to Mr. Taylor's comments from earlier. I had come in today with the expectation of requesting that these not be allowed for primary residents, but after hearing today's comments and the presentation by staff, I changed my mind on that. So I just wanted to let you know that while it may not seem like we listen to people and that we have our minds made up ahead of time, that's not always the case, and it might be hard to see that inner thought process, but I just want to let you know that as an example today, my mind was changed. So.
And I had every intention after the meeting to go up and express my appreciation for the job you're doing through District 5. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. I think that concludes that piece of it, and really all that's remaining is informational items and ongoing updates for the Planning Commission. So, am I missing anything?
Motion to adjourn? Is that?
Nope, we're not going anywhere
Okay.
yet.
Thank
These
you,
people,
everybody, for
if they're,
attending.
you guys are certainly welcome to stay while we discuss upcoming Planning Commission meetings and things like that. But
Thank you for coming.
The big event is done.
Thank you, Commissioners. Just upcoming meetings, we don't have any scheduled for the end of the year. I guess there's a slight chance, just given the timing, that there could be a December meeting for a minor item, a TPZ rezone, but we're not 100% sure on that. So this may be the last meeting of the year. That's why we wanted to recognize Commissioner Duncan. So nothing on the schedule. We'll certainly inform you if our December, I think it's 10th or 12th.
Yeah, so which date would that end up being on December,
That would
possibly?
be December 12th. December 12th?
A regular meeting date.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know that we're going to have one, but there's an outside chance. So just for informational items, you may have seen that the board took action on the Wolfcraft Collective appeal yesterday and did end up approving the use permit to allow that project to move forward. It was a 4-1 vote. Other than that.
Did they add any additional conditions?
Go ahead,
They added a condition, they amended the condition to allow for the craft school to do ceramics and fiber type quiet classrooms to 8 p.m. versus the original restriction of 6 p.m. And then we also amended a condition based on environmental health review. It turned out that the septic system did not need a variance, and that was incorrectly written in the original conditions based on the information received for that item. So it turns out that it didn't need a variance. It just needed to get a special design system.
So why did it require a variance? Because it was non-conforming?
It was erroneously written from the reviewer. So essentially it was looked at, and the way Amy explained it in the board meeting was their requirement for a setback to Wolf Creek is 600 feet, and the septic system design was about 750 feet, and so that was missed. And so the thought was it was going to be too close to Wolf Creek and therefore needed that variance. So that was corrected as a part of the approval.
Thank you.
Good job. All right. Anything more before we Ooh.
This is really something. We're saying goodbye to probably the longest-serving planning commissioner in the history of this county. And this is a big deal. And Laura, you will be missed by everyone in this county. And I want you to know that because everyone looks up to what your standards are. And you have been I've sat out there on planning issues when I was a school superintendent, and I always knew that there was one person who could always cut through the minutia, and it was always Laura Duncan. And so I will really, really miss you, and I know everyone in this room and out in the departments will miss you.
Thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. I was educated early on in the county politics and the way of doing things, and there was this supervisor, actually she was from the Truckee area, that, would come out and say, there'll be no monkey business during my meetings. And she would just bang the gavel loudly and let everyone know that they weren't going to get away with much. But we've evolved, I think, in this county.
I'm going to take that as my slogan.
And we've gotten better. It just seems that this county is growing and perspectives are changing and the actors are forever changing. New ones are always emerging, and I think it takes all of us to make it work here.
And how about a couple words of advice for your 3 newbies here?
Oh, I think you guys are going to do fantastic. I mean, I think it'll be great fun. You'll have 2 new members. I mean, I always approached this as it was really fun. I didn't consider it a burden to be a planning commissioner. I looked forward to it. There were times when, it's like, gosh, I have to read this. I mean, the stacks are pretty thick at times. But overall, staff usually, easily cut through the questions and gave you a shorter, briefer version of Cliff Notes to go forward with. So I certainly appreciate everyone and the work it takes to do it and, the ability to show up every day and be positive. I think that's a huge plus, and it just makes life better when you can be more positive about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
So what photo are you hoping for? Let's gavel this shut, yeah?
Oh, with me holding my lute.